Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive into, well, a really fascinating part of your health, all sparked by the work of Dr. Nathan Bryan.
Yeah, he's quite the expert. Biochemist, PhD in molecular and cellular physiology, professor at University of Texas Health Science Center for years.
Right. Loads of publications, edited textbooks. He really knows his stuff.
Exactly. And today, we're digging into his perspective on nitric oxide. It's this tiny molecule, but honestly, the impact it has is huge.
It's funny, though, how many people, even health-conscious folks, haven't really heard much about it, right?
Totally. It kind of flies under the radar. So our goal today is basically to unpack what Dr. Bryan says it is, why it's so important for you, and maybe some practical things to think about.
Okay, let's jump in. Nitric oxide, or NO. Dr. Bryan calls it a signaling molecule. That's an interesting description.
It is, isn't it? He means it's a signaling molecule. Crucial point, though, it's not nitrous oxide.
All right. N-euro, laughing gas, completely different thing. Good distinction.
Very different. Dr. Bryan sees NO as absolutely fundamental for human health and how long we live well.
So foundational, what does it actually do? What functions are we talking about?
Well, according to Dr. Bryan, a major one is regulating blood flow. It tells your blood vessels when to widen, when to relax, which affects oxygen delivery everywhere.
Okay, that sounds critical.
It really is. He also mentions its role in getting stem cells moving for repair, helping cells produce energy, even things like memory recall and, sexual function.
Wow, okay. Well, it's involved in a lot. But here's something Dr. Bryan points out that's a bit concerning. Our production naturally goes down.
Yeah, that's a key part of his message. It apparently starts declining pretty early, maybe around age 30. He talks about endothelial function dropping about 10 to 12% each decade.
Per decade. That adds up quickly.
It does. And Dr. Bryan really emphasizes that this loss, this drop in nitric oxide, is often seen as the very first step towards many age-related chronic diseases.
Like the first domino. So cardiovascular problems, metabolic stuff.
Exactly. Diabetes, maybe even cognitive issues down the line. He suggests they can often be traced back in part to this initial NO decline.
But he also says it's not inevitable, right? It's not just getting older.
That's the hopeful part. He firmly believes our lifestyle choices make a huge difference here. We can influence that curve, basically. Either make it worse or, slow it down.
Okay, so if it's declining, how would you know? Are there symptoms Dr. Bryan points to?
Yes, definitely. He often mentions erectile dysfunction as potentially one of the first signs.
The canary in the coal mine, as he puts it.
Precisely, because it often reflects underlying vascular problems, which are directly linked to nitric oxide levels and blood flow.
Makes sense. What else?
Increased blood pressure is another big one he highlights. If NO isn't there to help blood vessels relax, they constrict, pressure goes up. And interestingly, he notes many standard blood pressure meds don't actually fix the underlying NO issue.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, exercise intolerance. Yeah. If you find yourself getting winded really easily with just moderate activity like 15-20 minutes, or even climbing stairs feels way harder than it should, Dr. Bryan suggests that could also be a sign.
Right. Now, Dr. Bryan didn't just get this from reading papers, did he? He had some personal experiences.
Yeah, a couple of really powerful ones, apparently. He talks about being in medical school. This would be late 90s, early 2000s, and hearing Lou Ignarro, a Nobel laureate for his work on NO, speak about its potential. That made a huge impression.
I bet. Hearing it from a Nobel winner.
Exactly. But the other big one, and this sounds really impactful, was with his own father.
What happened there?
Well, his father had several health issues, including diabetes and paraplegia, and developed these non-healing pressure ulcers, wounds that just wouldn't heal with standard care.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It was. Dr. Bryan saw firsthand how the usual treatments weren't working, so he started exploring topical nitric oxide applications for those wounds. And according to him, within about 6 months, these wounds, which had been there for 4 years despite everything else, started healing significantly.
Wow. 4 years. That's incredible. Seeing that must have really solidified things for him.
Absolutely. It drove home the practical, real-world power of this molecule for healing.
So, tying it back to chronic diseases, he links low NO to cardiovascular disease, obviously with the blood pressure connection.
Yes, he sees high blood pressure, often driven by NO deficiency, as a major factor there. And also metabolic disease, diabetes, he points out. NO is actually needed for proper insulin signaling.
Okay. And he has some strong opinions about Alzheimer's disease, too, doesn't he?
Very strong. He says he's absolutely convinced nitric oxide could be key in tackling Alzheimer's, potentially even, curing it if caught early.
That's a bold claim. What's his reasoning?
He argues NO impacts several core issues in Alzheimer's. Reduced blood flow to the brain, which is common, insulin resistance in the brain, sometimes called diabetes type 3.
Might have heard that.
Yeah, it's also oxidative stress, immune problems, and those misfolded proteins that build up. He believes boosting NO can help address these underlying problems, but timing, getting in early, is crucial.
Okay. Now, he also talks a bit about the wider medical system and how it deals with things like this.
He does. He points out what he sees as a sort of disconnect. Sometimes great results happen in, say, animal studies with things like NO, but it doesn't always translate smoothly into treatments people actually get.
What does he think that is?
Well, he raises some concerns about the commercial side of medicine, suggesting that sometimes the incentives might lean more towards managing diseases long-term with ongoing treatments.
Rather than finding outright cures or addressing root causes like NO deficiency.
That's the kind of concern he voices, yeah. He talks about the focus sometimes being on polypharmacy, managing symptoms, rather than looking at fundamental solutions.
Which brings us to this idea he calls the molecule of longevity. Why longevity specifically?
He links NO to 3 really key hallmarks of the aging process, things scientists focus on for longevity.
Okay, what are they?
First, stem cells. NO helps signal them to get moving and turn into the cells needed for repair. Second, telomeres.
Those caps on the end of our DNA.
Exactly. NO activates telomerase, the enzyme that helps keep those telomeres from getting too short, which is a classic sign of aging. Like the plastic tips on shoelaces, you know?
Good analogy.
Yeah.
And the third?
Mitochondria, the cell's power plants. NO signals when the body needs more efficient mitochondria, boosting energy production, ATP.
And he feels he's benefited personally. He mentioned his vascular age.
Yeah, he uses that as an example. He says his own vascular health markers suggest an age younger than his actual chronological age, and he attributes that to actively working on maintaining his nitric oxide levels.
Okay, this next bit is fascinating. The role of our mouth in all this, the bacteria there.
This is huge in Dr. Bryan's work. He stresses that we rely on certain bacteria living in our mouths, on our tongues, to convert the nitrate we eat from things like spinach, beets, leafy greens into nitrite.
We can't do that conversion ourselves.
Nope. Humans lack the right enzymes. So these bacteria do step 1, turning nitrate to nitrate. Then, in the stomach acid, nitrite can become nitric oxide, so without those specific oral bacteria.
You don't get the benefit from the nitrates in your healthy salad.
Exactly. And that's why he's so strongly against antiseptic mouthwash.
Because it kills those good bacteria along with the bad.
Precisely. He cites studies showing that just using antiseptic mouthwash for a wet can actually cause a significant increase in blood pressure, even in young, healthy people, because you've wiped out that NO production pathway.
Wow. That's a common habit with a potentially big downside.
Yeah.
What about fluoride in toothpaste or water?
He raises concerns there too. Fluoride is also an antiseptic, so he argues it can harm that beneficial oral microbiome as well. He points to reports questioning its benefits and highlighting potential risks.
Interesting. So the health of your mouth is directly tied to your cardiovascular health through this NO pathway. Yeah. He also mentions tongue scraping.
Yeah, he suggests tongue scraping can actually help promote a healthier, more diverse oral microbiome, which is good. But using a tongue scraper and then following up with antiseptic mouthwash would kind of defeat the purpose.
Right, you'd scrape, then kill the good stuff.
Exactly. He even notes that the blood pressure benefits often seen with plant-based diets might depend partly on having a healthy oral microbiome to make that nitrate conversion happen.
And does he link poor oral health, like infections, to other issues?
He does mention potential links. He talks about seeing, anecdotally in his experience, correlations between things like chronic dental infections, root canals, and maybe even increased risks for certain other chronic conditions, possibly even cancer, though that's more observational.
Okay, so let's summarize the things Dr. Bryan suggests we should try to avoid if we want to protect our nitric oxide production.
Well, based on his points, too much sugar and high glycemic foods because they can mess with enzymes and feed the wrong kinds of mouth bacteria. Antiseptic mouthwash is a big one.
We covered that. And fluoride.
Yes, avoiding fluoride where possible, in his view.
Right.
And also antacids, particularly the strong ones like PPIs, because they reduce stomach acid needed for some nutrient absorption and potentially that final NO conversion step.
Got it. So, on the positive side, what helps support NO production?
Diet-wise, he talks about a balanced approach, good protein, healthy fats, Not too many processed carbs, but definitely including those nitrate-rich veggies like leafy greens, beets, assuming your oral microbiome is healthy.
Right, the microbiome piece is key.
Absolutely. Then exercise, moderate, regular activity is great for stimulating NO. Nasal breathing is another one he highlights.
Breathing through your nose. Why?
Because your sinuses actually produce nitric oxide,
Yeah.
so nasal breathing helps utilize that. Deep breathing exercises too. He even mentions humming.
Humming, really?
Apparently, certain frequencies might stimulate NO release in the nasal passages, and getting some sunlight UV and infrared light can trigger NO release in the skin.
Huh, interesting combination. And using non-fluoride toothpaste, presumably?
Yes, that aligns with his other points.
So looking forward, what's Dr. Bryan's take on the future? Where does NO fit in?
He seems to believe that technologies and strategies focused on nitric oxide are going to become much more central to healthcare. He sees it as fundamental.
But acknowledges changing habits is tough.
Oh, yeah. He knows it's hard to get people to change lifestyle habits, and the idea of just taking a pill is always appealing.
Yeah.
He suggests NO supplementation might help offset some bad habits, but it's not a magic bullet replacement for a healthy lifestyle.
Well, this has been incredibly informative. Dr. Bryan's work really shines a light on how crucial this one molecule, nitric oxide, is for, well, pretty much everything from daily energy to long-term health. It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It really makes you reconsider some basic assumptions about health.
And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has been valuable. Maybe it sparked some questions about your own health journey. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, ask about health issues you're curious about. Your input helps shape these discussions.
Absolutely. Dr. Bryan's perspective is a powerful reminder to look at those foundational biological processes.
Right, and here's something to maybe mull over. If nitric oxide has such widespread effects, what other fundamental biological keys to health and longevity might we be underestimating or only just beginning to grasp? Food for thought.